Hello, and welcome back to Breaking the Law. I'm really excited to talk to you all today about how the traditional approach to law is breaking people, because that traditional model is really, really broken. But what's really exciting is that we all have the opportunity to do things to break free from that traditional approach. Today, we're joined by a couple of really, really cool guests. My favorite person in the whole wide world is here. And no, it's not myself. That'd be down the list a little ways. But I'm joined by my wife, Meg Foreman, and Ashlyn.
Yes.
Yeah.
My favorite person is also here. My husband, Arli. And I'm so glad to have both of you here, and to hear from both of you and to share with you both. There's no one in the world's opinions that I respect more than yours. So I'm excited to hear what they are.
Yeah. What I'm really hopeful we can share with folks today is a perspective about how the traditional approach to law doesn't just impact us as legal providers. It's not just about us as attorneys or people that work in law firms or in legal departments or in law schools. It's the impact on us is something that we don't leave at work. I don't care how good somebody is at trying to bifurcate, their life and compartmentalize that. These are things that you carry home. And so the perspective that Arli, that Meg brings to the table today is really, really important. And we're going to talk about a lot of real stuff today because we've seen things. We've been through it. But Meg, why don't you tell our audience a couple of things about yourself, and then I will tell them how awesome you are at the end because you're far too modest. So go for it.
Well, I'm Meg. Sam and I have been married almost 11 years, 11 in December. We have 2 little boys, 6 and 2, and I mostly stay home with them and then have kind of my business and then do some stuff for the law firm. And Sam and I say, complement each other very well. If anyone's familiar with the Enneagram, I'm a 1 and he's a 3. So I'm the orderly black and white, and he's very much the achiever, dreamer. I have to be kinder to myself because I call myself the dream crusher, and he's the dreamer. So I have learned to kind of let him dream a bit before I come in and ask all the questions.
Okay, listen, you get to dream for 5 minutes,
Yes.
and then we're coming in with the reality, and we're going to walk through what that's actually going to look like, practically speaking. What does that sound like?
Yep.
Yeah. But her gift to the world is she's an improver, and she brings that perspective about understanding how things could be made even better, and really brings that to help make everything even more than it is to begin with. So and sometimes, and I'll be honest here, she really needs to kill those dreams. Some of them not good, they're bad, real bad. So
is that why sometimes Sam comes to me with an idea and he's like, tell me if you hate it, and I'm like,
yes,
okay, I will, I promise, I'll tell you. And he's like, no, really, if this is a bad idea, you have to tell me. And I'm like, I swear I will tell you if it's stupid.
I can't turn off the creative flow sometimes, so I've just decided that I'm going to get comfortable. I'm not going to turn it off. I'm just going to let it go, and I'm going to get more comfortable with the fact that some of those ideas are going to be real stinkers, real dud. So,
well, and I've had to stop and just realize, okay, I need to let him enjoy this process before coming in and being like, okay, how can we get this done? How can we do this? How can we do that? Going through the list of productivity and how and why and just all of that from my marketing background.
Sure.
That's how I had to approach everything.
Yeah.
So, and then now being with the boys, mostly it's what can I get done and be super productive all the time.
Yeah. It's interesting because when you say things like that, it translates so much to that need to be productive or to feel like no matter what I have going on or what I'm contributing to in this moment, production is the currency in which I value myself in.
Yes.
And I hear you, saying those types of things, and it's such a common theme in the things that we talk about, but it's so hard to be like, okay, how do I just enjoy this experience or enjoy the process of making this experience without having to tie it to the currency or the transactional nature of it being productive? It's exhausting.
He helps me with that.
I love that.
Just his dreamer creative kind of side of, let's have a little bit more fun. And
He is a fun guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
I do.
He makes
I
everything
like
a
to have fun.
game with our boys, and they do it.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
What's that like?
Yeah, our kids don't do anything
Well,
they're
it's
supposed
this
to do.
magical place. And then it's over.
It's like, let's race to the bathroom to brush our teeth. Like,
Yes.
And,
Yeah.
do you want to skip or do you want to run? And, stuff like that. So it's really helpful with two very energetic little boys.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I bet.
Yeah. Arli, why don't you tell us about yourself and what's your favorite tattoo? Because I see that you've got, a lot of really cool looking tattoos, at least from here.
Yeah, so I'm Arli, and I definitely have a lot of tattoos. I enjoy them. I don't know that I have a favorite. I think my favorite would be whatever's the newest. So
That's cool.
Some of them have meaning, and some of them are just cool. So I am Ashlyn's husband. We've been married for 13 and a half years now. And I think I've been married to the law for about 12 and a half years now. We've got 3 wonderful kids currently. They're wonderful. Not like we only have 3 currently, but
we're stopping at 3.
yes. We have a 5.5-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 1-year-old. So they
awesome.
They make our world entertaining. That's the best way to put it.
Yeah.
But just happy to be here.
Arli works full time. He went to physical therapy school. So Arli and I, we got married really young. We were 20. I was 22. We were 24. Is that how math works?
Just about to be 24. Yeah.
And so neither of us had a college degree at the time when we got married. So I got my college degree. Arli was in the military. And then when we moved to Kansas City. He went to undergrad at KU. And then while he was in the middle of undergrad, I thought, you know what? I'm going to go to law school. That sounds way more fun. And Arli's like, sure. Yeah, we just have endless amounts of money to pay for your whims. And so he made it work, and he went to undergrad while I went to law school. And then while I was in law school, he graduated and worked so I could finish. And then once I finished law school, he went to physical therapy school and I worked so that he could finish. So it's
That's
only
cool.
been, within the last 5-ish years that we've both been working on our careers together. But he got kind of his, I'm going to speak for you because you, again, are also modest, a really awesome gig out of physical therapy school and kind of exactly what he wanted to do. He runs the physical therapy clinic at McConnell. And went back.
Awesome.
He always wanted to work with servicemen and women. And so that was his whole point in going back to physical therapy school after getting out of the military. So he kind of serves in that role. He does more than physical therapy. I swear he helps all of them so much. But so he also works full time, which adds, a little bit of complication and flair to our already chaotic schedule in life. But I don't think I have any idea what Arli's Enneagram is. He refuses to take the test. So I'm an 8.
I'm not even sure what that. My favorite number is 12.
So that's very
It
helpful.
took him forever to actually take the
on
test.
The Enneagram.
Yeah.
There's a secret cheat code that you use to get
How
to the
long
12.
is it? I have like a real poor attention span.
Yeah,
so.
it's a lot of questions.
I'm going to guess it's not for you.
I'll stick with 12.
I don't know. I think Arli and I, we are certainly opposites. I'm very impulsive, and he is more practical for sure. He's definitely the more practical one. But he's also, interestingly enough, the more positive one. Probably, I look through things through the lens of, okay, let's think of all the ways this could go badly or fail. And Arli's like, it's gonna be great. You're gonna be great. There's no doubt in his mind ever.
Well, luckily you have a really good track record of, being great. So
Thank you.
That's well.
Can we just do this entire podcast doing good things about me? Because frankly, I'm in.
Our producer Jason, can you clip that and save that for posterity? We'll use that for promotional and just whatever. Yeah.
So yeah, again, the type of relationship where, there are things that Arli, I have to sort of say, okay, let's step back from that a little bit. We can get this done, or there's a way to do this, there's a way to accomplish it. So again, I think we definitely complement each other, and sometimes we can butt heads too and not necessarily agree on a path towards an outcome, but we're committed, so here we are.
Well, that's a good start. One of the things I wanted to talk about for our listeners and for our guests here today is about kind of a working definition of traditional law. Because we use that term a lot, and I think it's really important to have kind of a common starting place. There's not a dictionary definition of it, but when we use the term, some of the things we're thinking about is that there's a business model that aligns around partners and associates. Kind of partners are on top of the business model. Associates are employees. They're valued really almost exclusively for their productivity. The billable hour is really king. And even then, there's conflict within that system around things like that. You have cultures that often go along with that business model that can tend to be very hierarchical, where there's lots of office politics, there's lots of unhealthy personalities. I think that there's a lot of statements that go along with or a lot of value statements that go along with those cultures that prioritize, I think, kind of a dissonance between what people say, like, hey, almost every law firm I've ever bumped into, traditional or otherwise, says, hey, we're great for family, right? We really value that. That's really important to us. They say that they really want to help advance their people. They want to develop their people. They want to deliver excellent service. And some of these things are really deeply held by some folks and not by others. But the traditional model kind of, I think, pits the culture against the business model and really creates a lot of conflict there that I think really creates a lot of problems. So, Ashlyn, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think you described it really well. And just that, it's a model that has been around for a really long time. And that is not a simple, quick fix to solve or to address in all of the ways. It has worked for a lot of people for a very long time for a menagerie of reasons. But that it just because it exists and has existed in the way that it exists for so long doesn't mean it's the best way. And I think that's sort of what we aim to figure out and talk about and figure the nuance of. Yeah, for sure.
I think one other thing I would add to the traditional law description is that the hero of the traditional law model is the workaholic.
Yeah.
That is the pinnacle of success, is the workaholic. And I think that that's true almost without exception. This is the person who's given the most cultural credit within most firms, is the people that build the most, that work the most. This is the person who receives the most compensation. Just kind of everything revolves around the more you work, the more valuable you are. And there's really, I think, a very heavily weighted one-size-fits-all scorecard for traditional firms. There's not often very much room. There's usually some room, but not a ton of room for somebody to come in and say, well, hey, these are my priorities. I'm going to work hard. I'm going to do a great job. But my priorities don't revolve around trying to become a workaholic here. My priorities revolve around, I want balance. I want to see and know my children in a really deep and meaningful way. But I'm curious for Meg and for Arli, what kind of when you think about the definition of traditional law that we've just described, does that seem to resonate with you? Does that feel like something that you've seen Ashlyn and I and yourselves kind of experience at prior law firms, things that you've seen other people experience in the law?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I can see a huge difference from when you were at a traditional firm versus now in, obviously how you spend your time, but how you just process things and how you know our kids. Just an example, I was talking with you about this, of where when our oldest was about the age of how our youngest is now, he's almost 2, he was so attached to me, and I just, thought that was normal and didn't, go to Sam a whole lot and always just wanted mom. And then the second one, he just is obsessed with dad and, wants him to do everything for him. And he's only 2. And just seeing this difference in how much closer they are at this age because he's able to be home and spending time with him. I mean, it's night and day, the difference in the connection that he has at like this age. Because I mean, he has a great connection with our 6-year-old now.
Sure.
But that's a huge, huge difference that I saw.
Yeah. And you saw that. Oops, sorry, Arli. You saw that sort of transition or change when he moved away from the model that we were talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because he didn't have that time for the little, like the little connections on things. Because like he's been taking our oldest to school now, and he takes him to OT, and he has those moments. I mean, and he's able to come home and eat dinner with us every night.
I like dinner. I make good dinner.
Big fan of dinner myself, and lunch and breakfast and snacks.
All of the meals. Yeah.
I mean, he has a life outside of the office now, whereas before, I mean, I was working before we had our oldest, and I was working crazy hours too. I mean, and we were at a house, and I realized we didn't know any of our neighbors until maybe our oldest was like 2 when I started staying home more, and like I was getting to know people because we were both working so much. We weren't coming home till 9 or 10 o'clock every night.
Yeah.
I mean, and that obviously had to change for at least one of us when we had him. But just that sort of thing of like not even knowing the people that you live by because you're working so much is just crazy.
Yeah, I'd definitely say, the culture of the larger law firms, where Ash worked previously, there were a lot of wonderful people who really did truly want to incorporate families. They do stuff on the weekends out of their own pocket and bring in everybody and their families, and it just it meant the world to us. And then you also saw some of the other pieces where it was like, okay, we're going to do stuff and we're going to include spouses and stuff. But then you start to realize, oh, that's all during the summer when we're recruiting. And then once the fall hit, all that disappeared. And other than the last minutes, hey, you have to go to this dinner with your spouse because you have to represent the firm kind of thing. The family aspect, other than those individuals that continued to try and drive that, it fell off. And so I, personally became very frustrated a lot of times when constantly it was different marketing or different, networking things that when it all came down to it, they weren't anything that she was getting any credit for. And so it was, to me, from the person who was at the home with the kids, it felt useless. And it became, frustrating and difficult for me to see that happen, because then it would turn around and be, well, you didn't hit this many hours. But, throughout the day, she was doing these different things that weren't billable. And then at night she would come home, if she could get off in time, she'd come home and eat dinner and stuff like that, and then would lose that billable time. So, it is something that I personally have loved about you getting out of that system and into your own, doing things that matter. Right. I mean, she doesn't waste time with things that aren't beneficial to, her personally or her firm. She's working out every day, which is, in my field, obviously something very important. And, that mental health piece is really important to us. And just seeing the different things, I do a lot of times have to try and help her see her own worth, because she's still stuck on I only worked this much today. And I'm like, yes, you only worked that much, but it was all for you. Right? It all had a purpose. And not to say the things that she did at the firm didn't have a purpose. They just weren't essentially reimbursed.
Right.
And so now it all is. And she gets to, work just as hard, but she doesn't have to work as much, and she gets to spend more time. I don't know how 2 full-time parents do it with multiple kids. Do you know how many days off there are at school? I mean, like at least one day a week.
127.
Yeah,
I think,
it's just I'm not sure they actually go to school. I think they spend more
Probably not.
days at home.
Right. If the news is any indication. It's not
Without your new flexibility, I don't know what we'd do.
Yeah. Well, and I think Arli's too kind to say this, and I'll say it. In the moments under sort of a traditional approach, even at the most progressive and loving firm that I can imagine, the moments where I was making the choice to be home and when my kids got home from school, or to be the parent that did sort of the doctor's appointments in the school and the parties, and what the impact that would have on me mentally and emotionally is that I would be mean. Because I would feel so spread thin, or feel like I wasn't producing or contributing in a way that like who I was started to become this like resentful, angry person at home, because I felt like I was making a choice, and I was choosing my family, which is what I was expected to do. That's who I am. I'm going to choose my family. But then that came at a cost. And so then I started to resent all of them, because it cost me money, and it cost me what I felt like culturally I wanted people to think that I was the hero, and it was costing me the ability to be that. And so I was pulled between these two versions of myself. And Arli got the sort of the crux of all of that exhaustion and rage and all those things I was feeling. Is I didn't feel like I could make a difference here, but I couldn't make a difference at home, and I was just pulled in so many different directions. And I think even if, you know, everything aside and the amount of time that I'm able to give my family remains consistent, who I am when I'm giving it is more put together, more me than it was historically, because I'm showing up as myself now. I'm in my own home, whereas before I was still in the office thinking, okay, I only build 6 hours today, but it's not about getting the work done. That is what it is as a lawyer. Sometimes you have to work late to get the work done. It was about the transaction between my value, no matter what anyone said or did, my value in that model was tied to my production.
Yeah.
Well, and then there were all the other pieces, you know. I mean, even when you were home, you were on your phone or your laptop nonstop, because whether it was tied to something that you're doing, you know, a case you're doing, or just answering questions from, you know, other attorneys, a lot of which in your own firm, or just, I mean, when you have that many people in a traditional setting, there are, you know, wonderful people. But there's also a lot of toxicity. And so sometimes dealing with all of that stuff absolutely came home.
Yeah.
Well, and I think just to draw on that a little bit more, I think it's really important for our listeners to hear and understand that there's a lot of really, really good people in traditional law firms. And I want to stress that. I don't want people to hear that every partner is a bad person or anything like that. But I think as our experiences demonstrate, the system really freaking matters.
Yeah.
And if you put really good people in a bad system, you start to see bad outcomes. And if you repeat that enough over time, at some point, really good people aren't anymore. And they start to be the ones that choose, knowing what the outcome's going to be, to create the bad outcomes. And maybe at that point, for some of them, they're not as good a person as they used to be.
Yeah.
And that's really hard to hear. And I don't want that to come across with a lot of judgment, because I don't mean it in that way. Well, for some people, some people it probably
I can think
is.
of a few.
But I mean, the point is that we have to be aware and we have to be accountable.
Yeah.
Because what we do as leaders in our lives, in our families, in our businesses, it really matters.
Yeah.
And it echoes. It echoes way beyond just the time that you're there. And Meg, I'm really curious, because you know the challenges that I've had at times with my mental health. And then same question for Arli from a well-being perspective. How did you see the traditional approach to law impact my wellness and my well-being and the well-being of our family?
In the traditional arena, I mean, you were working so much that you didn't have time to work out to keep your physical body healthy. You weren't having any sort of outlet to let out kind of that mental stuff other than me, which then, you didn't even always have time to talk to me about it because you were working so much. I mean, you would be at work, but then you would come home and then, like Arli said, be on your phone or your computer, still having to respond to things and people sending you stuff at 10 o'clock at night that then you have to respond to. And I mean, that gave me a visual when you were saying that of our oldest pretending to be dad. And he had a computer out and would say, I'm working, you know? And like, I still have that visual in my head of that. And that's not him anymore. So, I mean, I have a history of anxiety, depression, and things like that. So I had been working on just the coping mechanisms and therapy and all that stuff for years. So then after he moved into our firm, he was able to have that time then to work on that stuff and talk to a therapist. And I mean, we would go together, we would go separately, and just being able to do that has completely changed our relationship. And I mean, it's been huge of just this different understanding. And I mean, how we raise our kids, how we talk to each other, how we work things out is completely different. Because before, when he was in the traditional area, I felt like everything was so separate with us. Because he had so much mental load and energy that was having to be spent on work that he didn't have the space for, I mean, the mental health and stuff of me and our family. So, and now, I mean, you can't ever say that there's like a true work-life balance, that it's half and half. I mean, one's going to be up a little bit, one's going to be down, and it switches. But now, I mean, instead of it being, you know, this far apart, they're able to ebb and flow instead of being, I mean, just a vast difference between the two.
Yeah,
you know?
no chance of balance.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm really excited that now my kids will say, you know, when is mom coming home instead of is mom coming home tonight? You know, because it was a frequent thing of I'm putting the kids to bed again, you know, and they'd tell them every night, you know, she'll come in and give you a kiss, but you could see it weighed on them for sure. And now it's more of a when's she coming home, because they know she is, you know, and not to say that there aren't times. I mean, you have things that happen late, but it's, you know, once a month instead of 3 or 4 times a week. And so it is completely different. And then, you know, as you mentioned, that mental health aspect is huge. And seeing some of those compartments broken open to where, you know, now, for example, she's a room mom now. All right, now, that is a huge deal in every piece of that. One, because I never would have pictured that. But two, because there never would have been time for that. And and so, yeah, she acts like she doesn't enjoy it, but she loves being there with the kids. She might hate making little reindeers, but she does love being there with the kids, and she gets to do that she gets to do that more than I do. And so it is, it's incredible seeing the difference of I mean, it's you know, Christmas time of year, you think of the Christmas Carol and Scrooge. And that really is a lot of what was going on previously. You know, it was just work. And, you know, now we're giving out turkeys.
Yeah. Instead of, oh no, I'm not going to go there.
Wait, am I Scrooge in this?
There's a turkey joke in there for anyone that was slow on the uptake, if you're picking up what I'm putting down. Ashlyn, I'm really curious for your take on this question. When you think about like the, you know, specifically your experience in traditional law and the strain that was putting on you, was it just the types of things that you had to do, or was it the significance of those, particularly as kind of Arli had addressed, that some of these things don't tie to something that makes sense on your personal scorecard?
You know, I think if we're in the spirit of accountability, struggles, the things that made it difficult for me are somewhat wholly my responsibility in that I could not separate myself. When you put me in a system that is designed for me to be the most successful in it, despite how many times I tell myself I don't need that. I don't need to be the hero in this story. I can just be the hero in this story. And I would tell myself that every day, but my actions would indicate I needed to be the hero over here and here. And I couldn't do both well. And there are lots of people who can. I couldn't. It just wasn't in my nature. So part of it is being accountable for the fact that the narrative I told myself was, I don't need this. This is what's important to me. But then this is what I would choose if I had to make the choice.
Well, and to jump in, I mean, I would also hear, I'm not getting any work done because, and then fill in something that, I maybe asked for her some help with dinner or, something like that. And it was, I just have to get this done, and I can't because you're asking me to essentially, do some family related stuff.
Yeah.
So,
right.
And I think for me, I also gave, I don't know if you guys are like this. I suspect that you are, but I'm not very good at giving only pieces of myself to something that matters to me. So it also, the traditional model is built in a way that it will take what you give it. And if you are the type of person who can only give it this little box and you go home every day and you've given it the box and it's accepted the box and that's your transaction. But as a person, I would be like, well, I have a little more. And they'd be like, well, yeah. And then I'd say, well, I actually have a little bit more. And it would take and take and take. And that's the way the system is built.
It's a vacuum.
Yeah.
It just sucks
and
it
so
all
you
out
just
of you.
keep giving until one day you turn and you think, I have nothing left. It wasn't even, the work. I love the work. The people. I love the people. It was truly a system that was designed to take and take and take from me that I, in my own sense of accountability, let take and take and didn't build those boundaries well enough or strong enough. And then by the time I realized it, I couldn't build them. I had to just say, I can't survive in this anymore. I don't know. What about you? Was your experience similar to that, or how would you answer that question?
I'm sorry. What was the question again?
The question was it did you, in your experience, was it more based on like the tasks, the what you were taking on, or what in the
Oh, right. Like, was it just the tasks that created the drain or the strain, or was it the significance of those?
Yes.
No, I think it was a little bit of both. I think there was the practicality of there was so much that I was committing to, and I think very similarly wired that I don't. It's really hard for me to do things halfway.
You mean attorneys are type A personalities?
You watch your mouth. No.
You don't know anything about us.
What Meg can certainly attest to from having shared a domestic setting with me for a long time. I'm talking about laundry. I'm talking about laundry here.
Right?
Is that I'm usually either like all about something or almost nothing about something. There's not a lot of me in the middle. And so coming in and half behinding it, we're going to try to maintain our G rating on something because it'll matter. Maybe.
Not you.
I don't know. Just isn't something that I'm willing to do or wired to do. But the significance definitely, and the lack of significance definitely created a drain on me. I was in a setting where I was very, very productive, very, very profitable, and it didn't matter.
Where you're so entrepreneurial. And he's out, talking to people and getting business, but then not being rewarded for that.
Or the reward was so disproportionate to both the effort and the outcome that it created a lot of frustration.
Well, and we had times you were told to stay in the office.
Right.
You need to be
Right.
in the office billing hours,
Yeah.
not doing what you like to do,
Right.
going out into the community and being a part
Right.
of the community.
And at times when the performance of the work was not the issue, things were getting done, they were being done on time, and so that wasn't the issue. It was other things that were creating conflict, that were putting other people in a position where they needed to put pressure on me to do something because of some sort of outcome that they needed to try to create an appearance of.
Yep.
The politics, and you know.
Yeah, and I'm sad that they were in that situation, because that must have been really difficult for them as well. But and lovely people that I care for very deeply.
Yeah.
But yeah,
That was the
created
system.
a lot of strain. Yeah, because the system was optimized. I mean, it's the system is optimized for one thing. It's to glorify production.
Yep.
It's how many bricks can you make. And if you make enough bricks, and you make enough of the right bricks, and you make them for the right people, and you do it long enough, then eventually you get to profit off of other people making bricks.
I think what we'll find, and you and I have talked about this at length, and we will definitely talk about it more later, is that, at least for me, what I turned around and started to see is that the brick builders ahead of us were looking at us to be more brick makers and builders. Right. And we turned around, and the generation below us was like, wait a minute. I'm not building anything for anybody at any
want me to do what, when?
In which you want me to do that. And it was such an eye-opening experience for me, because their boundaries were so hard and mine were so squishy that I was like, wait, if you don't, if I'm going to build and you don't build, then no, I'm not going to make any money off anybody, because you're not willing to give what I'm willing to give, or what historically has been willing to give. And I think
I think that's a big part of the problem, is that the system relies on economics that no longer make sense.
Yeah.
Because the people running the systems, often aren't running it like business people. They're not thinking about like, hey, what makes the most sense here? How do I optimize outcomes? And I think in a lot of ways that's created a tremendous amount of pressure that has institutionalized animosity. Partners are fighting over what they view as a limited pie. And then they have to hold associates at an arm's length, because, if that person advances, then they're going to take some of my pie, right? They're not thinking about, and I'll never forget, saying, hey, if I make you more money, can I make more money too? Because I really need to do a little bit better for my family. And the answer was no. I mean, the answer was, you just need to trust the system, trust the process, and you need to wait. And that waiting was an extended period of time. It wasn't like, hey man, here's a couple of months. It wasn't, it was just, you have to follow the same scorecard and the same path that everybody else does. And that was really frustrating and really disappointing.
And exhausting.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. I mean, joking, but you don't joke unless there's some kernel of truth in there sometimes, of, if I have to do this any longer, and I'm just going to jump out this window. And I don't want to make light of that, because, that's such a serious topic. But the level of frustration that working your ass off and doing really good work, and then just having it not really matter on any of the things that matter to you. Is just, it's really frustrating, and it just bleeds the life out of you.
And I think it's okay to say, at least from my perspective, if one of the things that matters to you is being fairly compensated for the amount of work and effort and energy that you put forth, that's okay. It is a priority of mine. I want to feel like what I'm giving is being returned fairly to me. And I don't, and I think because what you said rings so true for me in my experience, and I know experiences of other friends, lawyer friends of mine who have left big law, is the idea that if you just work really hard and wait, you too will one day have the corner office and the, all the associates and the 7 staff and the whatever the dream is at whatever law firm you're at.
Their dream.
Right. But that's an outdated, antiquated sort of approach. My family can't afford for me to wait, not financially, but emotionally and experience-wise, for sure.
Well, and there have been such developments. I mean, everything of, the technology used to make things more efficient, to, cut costs, to cut time. But that, that's not the old way. And, this is the way I've done it forever. And I don't want to spend a weekend learning this new thing. So I'm just going to continue doing this in an efficient way.
Right.
And then somebody who is being more efficient, you know, there's no reward for that.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I've got a couple last questions as we kind of wind down this episode. For Meg and for Arli, what sort of values and culture did you think that you would find from, you know, kind of law firm life as you were getting in? As you know, Meg, I was already an attorney when we met and got married, but what kind of did you expect from a values, from a culture perspective, and what did it kind of end up being, do you think?
I think at first, I mean, because we would have like pre-kids, you know, and like partners and associates, like kind of parties together and get to know each other and things. And because one of the firms you were at was really good at that and would do that sort of stuff.
Yep.
And you kind of get to know people and feel some connection there. So they were trying, but then when it came to the actual like work and office life, they weren't able, like you weren't able to have that with me, that like connection and time and things like that, because you had to be there all the time and your mental energy needed to be spent there. Your physical presence needed to be there. So I just saw this divide in a little bit of things being presented kind of a certain way in these special like events, you know, once or twice a year where you feel like good and you're like, oh, like there's some culture here of people trying to help each other and things, but then it not really panning out in the everyday. So that, I mean, that's hard.
Yeah, for sure. What about you, Arli?
I would say, you know, honestly, since law school, it felt really backstabby and cutthroat. You know, I mean, and in a sense, there were limited spots for what everybody thinks of as a lawyer job and a lawyer paycheck. And so everybody was trying to climb that. And, you know, I saw Ash had a core group of friends, but outside of that, it was, there was a facade, right? You saw a certain part of people, but as soon as you turned around, you heard different things, you know? And I did see a fair amount of that. And those parties, you know, I mean, those parties were put on and sometimes they felt like they were, hey, look how well I'm doing, you know?
Hey, everybody, come see how good I look.
Exactly. Love it.
We're going to get our Anchorman reference in there.
Yeah, I'm glad we did. Check. Mark it.
It's, you know, and so that part, it wasn't exactly what I expected. I expected a lot of hard work and I expected, you know, a very strong personalities, but I guess I wasn't quite prepared for how some that, you know, you thought were friends, the way that they could change really quickly.
Yeah. That's really hard.
Arli is such a, like a loyalist.
You're in or you're out with me. That's the bottom line.
I mean, but once you're in with him. And I think it was hard for him. He doesn't engage in the politics of politicking, and I fall for it every time. And Arli's like, what, you know what? Just go in there and do X, Y, and Z, and tell them you are worth way more. And, you know, I'd be like, well, the appropriate time for that is probably X, you know, at this point. And so I think it was a struggle in not the way that we handle those types of things and kind of seeing, you know, Arli was just like, let's go in there and who do I need to talk to? And I'm like, okay, honey, I have to do this myself. I'm a big girl. And was always just on my team and has always felt, you know, that I deserve the whole world. So
that's funny because I'm kind of the same way. He wouldn't talk a lot about kind of like politics stuff, but then things when they would happen, I'm like, what? You know, and like asking all these questions and, you know, then I have that. I'm just more, I don't know, what's the word? Direct. Direct with things.
Yeah.
So
Candid, blunt.
Yes, I'm like,
okay,
teller.
we get it.
I attribute that to my German grandmother.
I love that.
So Europeans are very direct, and I was with her a lot growing up. So
I love that.
having to balance that. And I was the one who's like, no, I'm like, it needs to be this way. And my oneness of justice and black and white,
Sure.
So he's like, but there's this and there's this and there's this. And so that's so funny that you and I going to have that.
Yeah. Arli's like, there's nothing to consider here.
Well,
yes.
and I think that's a telling reflection on just kind of what the traditional system does to people that are otherwise, I think, very confident.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And really
That's a
understand
really
the
good
quality that they bring to the table is it makes us constantly aware of our shortcomings, and it constantly holds us at arm's length with an expectation that to break the path is somehow wrong, or that there's some sort of moral defect to that.
You started questioning yourself more.
Right. And
as we got farther and farther into the career.
Yeah.
And that's when I was like,
well, the goal was
you
to be the strongest and the alpha, but there can only be one of those, so that everybody is slightly cutting each other down, here and there, and
because it's a scarcity game. Mm-hmm. It's like in order for me to win, you've got to lose.
Mm-hmm.
And not every firm, not every culture, not every attorney approaches it that way. But I think that's so heavily ingrained in so many places is that, I've got to be on top. I've got to be the best. I've got to be the greatest. And that is at the exclusion of other people's success and advancement sometimes. People fighting over points, fighting over percentages, the long drawn out frustration of so-and-so won't give up this point, even though they're well past, where they created enough value to justify it. But they have enough political clout in the firm to continue to hold on to that. Mm-hmm. Which, for what it's worth, and we'll go into this more detail on some future episode for nerds and wonks like myself, but there are few systems that are as efficient at destroying the time value of money as the traditional law model.
Yeah, totally.
There's nothing that I've seen that so displaces it in such an efficient manner. And that has devastating human consequences, especially when you couple that with the amount of student loan debt that so many young attorneys and their families are bringing into life these days. And there's a moral component to that you can't avoid forever.
No.
But one thing I do want to tack on that I think was mentioned earlier is the accountability piece. I'm really glad you brought that up, Ashlyn.
Thank you.
We're accountable for our own decisions within the system, and I don't want to miss an opportunity to take responsibility for my own decisions. I chose a path to optimize and try to optimize my own outcomes within a traditional model, and became really good at climbing Workaholic Mountain.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sorry for what that did to our family and what that did to our marriage.
Mm-hmm.
So, here's kind of my last, this is the penultimate question. We will link in the show notes the definition of the word penultimate, and we'll also fact check whether or not I'm using it correct. It's the second to last. It's the one before the end. This is an everybody question. What led you to decide that it was time to get out? That it was time to get out of traditional law and go do something else?
When I first met Sam, we sat down and were having lunch. I had a friend of mine, a mutual friend of mine, was insistence.
Thank you, Jordan.
Thank you, Jordan. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't long before I realized we had so much in common. But one of the things I thought was so interesting, and I hope that this is still true or that I'm remembering this right, Sam, but didn't both of us reach where we were like on a vacation or some kind of trip?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
And
that's where the great origin story begins.
Right?
Go for
so
it. Yeah.
Everybody that works at a traditional law firm is going to be like, no one can take vacations anymore. You must all stay here. But for me, frankly, Arli had been encouraging me to see my own value and see what the traditional model was doing to me. And again, it is not a person who's doing this to me. It is a system that I am participating in that continues and giving myself to, that was continuing to really damage my family and myself. And I just had an experience last year where I almost died. And I saw the fear. I didn't know at the time, frankly, I had no idea that it was as serious as it was. I had blood clots in both my lungs, and I was pregnant with our youngest. And when I looked at Arli after I'm in the ICU, and he is terrified. I mean, and I'm not really understanding how big of a deal this is, and him being in the medical field more certainly knew what the risks were. And it changed my life. The idea that he was going to have to take care of our babies without me, and that there's so much I missed or that I wouldn't be around for. And it was a slow shift. I didn't just become a new person. It was a slow shift over time over what my priorities were and what mattered to me. And then I learned, I had an experience at work where I didn't feel like no matter what I was producing, I was not getting paid what I felt like I was entitled to, frankly.
Maybe next year.
And I was told, if you just, you need to go prove it some more and prove it some more. And I realized, to who? Like, it just got exhausting. And we took a trip with my family in April. And I was sick to my stomach about this idea. And I just kept talking about it over and over and over again. And, Arli was in my corner every time saying, he's like, worst case scenario, we figure something else out. But you have to do this. You can do this. And my therapist was like, you can 100% do this. And they both made me pick a deadline. And they gave me a deadline of when the choice was made. The choice was made for me long before I came to my own conclusions. But they gave me a deadline and I stuck to it. And I would have never been brave enough had Arli not, and continue to just pour confidence into me. And it's the best decision I've ever made. But it was truly a slow shift over time and perspective about what someone was grading my work, my value as a person. And I was tying that to what I was getting paid. And I realized that was not sustainable. It was going to kill me in one way or the other. It was going to kill my family. It was going to kill me. So I had to make a choice, and I did. So thank you for having my back, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah, I and the reason why is, I'd love to say it was solely because of your mental health, which did absolutely play into it. Your mental health, my mental health, the kids, everybody. But there was also the aspect of efficiency and my thought process of, if you get paid for the work you do and you're working this much, we're going to have a lot of money. And so that kind of, that little bit of, and that's the other thing, taxes, everybody hates taxes, right? You lose so much of what you bring in. And that was also happening at work. Right. And so mental health was probably the biggest part of the final push. Yeah. But all along, I wanted her to be her own boss because I know she could be.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. That's awesome. I think for us, it happened in two stages. I mean, one was the first firm that I left and went to another one. But the really big move was when we were on vacation.
Yeah.
And we were just like, this doesn't make sense. I mean, it was getting to a place where, because I've been so good at climbing that mountain that now I realize wasn't actually a mountain. I was climbing down into a pit.
Yeah. And being on vacation, but then still having to work.
Yes. Right. Having to just constantly
when work gives out the Wi-Fi, the network routers. No, you don't have to pay for it. Here, just take this, and your laptop.
Yep. Yeah.
So it's like we took this vacation, but you're not on vacation. Right. I was so frustrated.
And I could have set better boundaries. I mean, there were things that I could have done, but I don't know that I really saw that modeled and probably wasn't looking for it.
Yep.
I don't know if it was there or not, but that's what I was doing. That's what I was working for, and taking that time out of the family bucket to go pour in here, and just it wasn't working, and we were just working way too much, and just kind of something had to change. We had to go do something else.
Yeah. And working so hard and seeing this build up, and then with the second place of just then really not getting rewarded for that. I don't want to say rewarded, but what was supposed to be.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a big push.
Yeah, there were some things that anyway. A lot of good people. I hope some of them are listening to this. People I really admire, respect. I'm so grateful for how they've contributed to my success, our family's success, and getting to this place. And I don't want to lose an opportunity to say thank you. I really appreciate how you've made my life my life better in the process.
Yeah.
But
Just the system doesn't work for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's so hard that I think that was a big barrier for me is, I mean, you talk about loyalty, Arli, and I mean, that's just how I'm wired. It's so hard. And leaving a place, the biggest thing was I felt like I was ending relationships.
Yeah.
And in some ways, some of those relationships didn't really follow me. And a lot of that's on me. And some of that's on other folks as well. But yeah, that's really hard. That's really hard. But I have one last question. This is the final question.
What's the word for the final question?
Andy can sing.
Sorry, before I do that, Meg, do you have anything to add on just kind of like what our process was leading to that decision?
I remember sitting in that hotel room, and I feel like my word for it is, I'm like, all right, I just pushed you off the ledge.
Yeah, so I was going to say, who made that decision?
Because I'm like, I can't do it.
I think in our house, I was the one who was like,
we're done.
This is it, you know? And then it took a lot of encouragement. And even after she'd given her notice, she was like, the loyalty, I don't feel right about this. I want to go back. And I, you know, had to remove her. And so,
Let me ask you, this is an additional question for Arli and Meg. What would have happened if I hadn't listened and hadn't made the move? Where would we be?
Gosh, I don't know.
Yeah. I don't want to think about it anymore.
Yeah.
Arli.
Yeah.
I mean.
Yeah. Well, I mean, because I see it vividly in my head at that point because our oldest was about 18 months and we started talking about, okay, like, do we want to have another kid and things like that? And I'm like, if you're where you are now, I can't because I can't do this alone.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, I'd pretty much say the same thing, hurting, you know? I mean, like, that's where we would be because we've said those same words, you know, I can't continue this path. And so,
And it, you know, again, Arli has always been good at trying to give me space to come to my own conclusions that are what's best for me. Because if you know me at all, you know that telling me what to do will result in a complete tantrum.
Just tell her the opposite.
I have a real problem with being told specifically what is next. But Arli, you know, had to make me think that it was my idea. But I know that it wasn't. But it was the best idea. And I can say this because of where I was at and what it was doing to me. I think I'd be a shell of myself, and that is no one's fault but mine. And I don't want anyone to ever hear that and think it's because there's someone responsible for that. I was responsible for what I was giving and what I was willing to give and sacrifice and what I was allowing a system or a job or a career to take from me. But had I not, I couldn't set boundaries in that system. For whatever reason, it wasn't, I couldn't successfully do it. And so I was never going to be the version of myself which I am today, which is healthier and more authentic and true to myself than I have ever been. So it would have been terrible. I think it would have been terrible. And for everyone. And people that can make it, again, like Sam said, in that model, there's no judgment. I think it's amazing. I think obviously it has worked for some. I don't know that it's sustainable. Let me rephrase that. I don't think that it's sustainable for everyone long term. But
yeah. Meg and Arli, if you had one piece of advice for attorneys that are still in a traditional law model firm on how they can be better spouses, better parents, what piece of advice would you give to them?
Read the book Boundaries. That changed so much in work life and in our marriage and friends, family. Just that book just changed so much for us and helped us know that we are supposed to have boundaries.
Yeah. It's called Boundaries?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool.
Wonderful book. We'll link it in the show notes. We'll actually link it in the show notes. Yeah.
For serious.
Yeah, for reals. Yep.
Yeah, I honestly don't think I have any advice. That sounds terrible, but The reason is it didn't work for us. And so, if I was going to say something, it would be along the line of boundaries, but that didn't work in our world. And I honestly, I'm not sure where I have seen that work. And so somebody with a spouse, especially if you add in kids, I don't have any advice.
Yeah. I mean, is maybe the big takeaway, like, you've got to listen.
Yeah.
Listen to the people that love you and care about you the most.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and
be open to that.
when you, like we talk, when you do that, you suffer in the system. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's depressing and awful.
And on that ray of sunshine.
We'll play out on a sad, sad song.
Oh, goodness.
You stay classy, San Diego.
Oh, man. I love it. I love it. All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Especially thank you, Meg. And thank you, Arli.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for having us.
So much.
Please join us, folks, for our next episode where we're going to talk about what it's been like since, what it's been like trying to get out of traditional law and into better law. We hope you join us for that episode. We hope you stay classy. And wherever you're at, I hope that you'll find some hope knowing that you're not stuck. You have choices, you have options. Whatever that little step is, whatever that next thing is that you need to do, it may not be your fault for where you are, but it is your responsibility to do something about it. So we appreciate you. Go break the law.